Now we're going to add a couple more inputs. So a diffuse map does not make a material. Okay, this is not a usable material. This is garbage. Um, if you hand this to me and say this is a finished map, well, it's not. We need some way of controlling roughness. So our dirt should be maybe rougher in other spots and not so much in some spots. We want to be able to control this more than just having a number input into it. We also need to be able to control the normal so that it looks like it's bumpier than it currently is in here. I'm just going to undock this for a second so that I can just do some drag and drops. So in this case, all I've got is a normal map, and I'm going to drop that in. Just redock this back up top. And we want to plug the normal map in. So we can just simply plug that in. And now we have a normal map. So you can see it's going to start looking rougher. So Alt click on the input link. You can see it kind of looks smooth. Plug it in. We've got a normal map. Okay, so we also want this to scale at the same time this does. So when this one scales, this one has to scale as well. We don't need to replicate this. This is the input. This is the control for it. All we have to do is take the output of our scaling control here, our texture coordinates, and plug them into the normal map. That's it. That's all we had to do. Now for the roughness, we want to control that as well, and we want to be able to control this and play around with the amount of roughness. Now, pumping textures directly out of Substance or anything else is great, but you're going to suddenly find they look different in other applications. You want to be able to tweak them and push and pull them. So we're going to be able to push and pull some of this stuff as well. Now, I haven't created a grayscale map of this, so we literally could just go and do Control W. So when you pick it, you can go Control W or copy paste Control V, Control C. But a Control W will copy whatever you have selected. So even if you have that, stick your mouse where you want it, Control W, and it will drop it right where your mouse is. So that can be really handy. So this is going to be our input into our roughness. We no longer need this for now. And again, we're going to want this to scale correctly with the rest of it. So we're going to plug in our tiling so it tiles up and down. We just need to think of this as a grayscale map. You could even just take the R if you like, or the other channels if you wanted to get the results from just them. We do that for something called channel packing. We'll discuss that later. So let's just assume this is a grayscale texture at this point. They'll now all scale. Well, how do we go about controlling the amount of roughness and the amount of normal map? Okay, so if you look at this in a grayscale value, it may not get us exactly what we want for what we're going to do. So we're going to need a couple nodes. I'm just going to move the shader over, and I'm going to add a multiply node, and I'm going to apply an add node as well. So I'm going to create two of them. Add. I hit A, held A down, and left clicked, and I got an add node. So what we can do then is multiply will allow us to take values and multiply them up and down. So if we had a range of values from 0 to 1 and multiplied them by 2, 0 would remain as 0. 0 times 2 is 0. 1 times 2 is going to become 2. So we'd make the hot spots hotter. Well, what if we want 0 to be half, 0.5, or a 1, push it up and down? That's going to be an add. So if you take a range from 0 to 1 and add 1 to it, 0 becomes 1 and 1 becomes 2. Okay, so we can play with the values up and down and then multiply them. So what I'm going to do is I want to multiply first, and I'll just pull that out of the way. So I'm going to plug that in. And then I'm going to add. So we're going to multiply the value, then we're going to add to the value, and then we're going to control the roughness with it. I'm going to need two inputs, and so I'm going to create two of these. This one should start, the multiply should start a value with 1, so it doesn't change anything. So 1 times whatever the value is, okay, is going to be whatever the value is. The add, we don't want it to change anything, so to make sure that the add doesn't change anything, we're going to add 0 to it by default. Fair enough. So I'm going to pick both of these, convert to parameter. The first parameter is going to be, we'll call it contrast. And maybe actually we'll call it Better yet, we'll call it rough contrast. And then the second one, we're going to call it rough offset. And so those are now both parameters that have been added in. So this is what's cool about our material instances. You'll see we don't have those in here. It's because we haven't hit apply. So I'm going to hit apply. And now we have these two new inputs that we can control. So if we go back to our level here, and I'll just peel this off so I can work with it, you'll see that I'll be able to turn on our roughness contrast, and we'll be able to play with it up and down. Probably not going to do a whole lot of difference right now. And then a roughness offset, and we should be able to offset it, and we'll call roughness 1 maybe, and we should be able to see a difference of it of some kind. So it's going to be subtle with dirt. I can see a slight change. You guys may not be able to see it. I'll just put it at a value of 10. It doesn't appear to be making massive changes to it with this texture map. It's probably there. It's probably seeable, but it's very, very slight is what it's going to happen with something this simple. Our U and V are still there. So as we build these out, we can extend them and keep adding functionality. Now we want to do it with the normal map as well. Now that we've got the ability to have roughness going on this, and let's just make sure I know which ones these are, so I know which ones I'm looking at. There we go. Okay, so you can see they've got a normal map on them now, and they've got this normal setup. But we might want to push that normal amount up and down as well. So I'm going to go back to the material again, and now we got to control the normal map. Now we can't do the normal map this sort of way. We simply can't. Normal map is very specific. Blue in a normal map actually denotes no change in the angle of the surface. It has nothing to do, by the way, a normal map with the height change. It has to do with the change in angle of the surface and how light bounces off of it. Blue says no change. The pinky reds are one axis, and the greens are the other axis. So we need to be able to control those individually without affecting the blue. If we change the blue, we're going to get really wacky results. So we need to only be able to change the R and the G. Now there's ways of doing it through building up your own nodes, but there's another way that I figured out that is called flatten normal. So right now you can see there are normals on the model. I'm going to plug it into flatten normal. So flatten normal is kind of opposite of what we want. The flatten normal node will flatten the normals, the flatness, and it defaults it to a value of 0. So if I plug a value in here, a value of 0 is 0 flatness, so it's not flat. If I take the flatness up to 1, it'll appear to flatten out the normals, and you won't see the normals anymore. That's really counterintuitive once we get it to having it in the material instance. We kind of want a normal input. How much normal do you want? So we want the exact opposite of what our spinner and our flatten normal is doing right now. So to do that, we're going to add a 1 minus node. 1 minus takes the value of 1 and subtracts your value from it. So if we've got a value of 1 and we subtract 0, the output is 1. If we have a value of 1 subtracted from 1, we have a value of 0. So it simply inverts the 0 to 1 value. Now I can now right click on this parameter and say normal amount. And we'll leave it at a value of 1, so that we get the normal amount of normal, if that makes any sense. I'll apply that. You can see now in my material here, it shows up, and I can take the normal amount and I can crank up and take down the amount of normal. So now I can tweak the amount of normal. It makes sense. Value of 0 is no normal. Value of 1 is the amount the normal map is, but at least now I can tweak it. Now, something to note, you can get crazy. You know, as you start pushing this up, it just starts looking ugly. You start seeing that, don't. You shouldn't be seeing any of that sort of thing. Normal maps and bump maps are a subtle change. You're not making it look better. You're making it look really ugly. Just don't do it, okay? I don't know why I always see people just cranking them up until they look like this shadowy disaster, and it just doesn't look good. Generally, you're kind of turning them down and trying to make it less obvious or whatever. I try and produce my normal maps as strong as I can with them looking good, and then I can sort of tweak them down from there in the render engine, right? In this case, we just got a real-time render engine going on. So that's going to allow us to be able to have these inputs. Now that's becoming more of a usable material overall. So this is starting to look like what I'd expect a material to function like. You know, we can tile it, we can control the roughness values, and you know, we can control the normal amounts, and then we might want to get into other you know, input values. Maybe it's a metal material, want to control the metallic amount. You know, we can do this same sort of setup with it to push and pull the value. Maybe we do want to control the specular overall. We can have inputs into it, and that'll allow us a material that's useful now. Now, one more step to make this really useful is to parameterize all of these as well. Because right now, this is a dirt texture and only a dirt texture. But why wouldn't I be able to use this for other types of, maybe just other types of dirt or rock or other things? Really, if I swap these texture maps out with other textures, well, then all of this is still valid. But again, we want to be able to do that in the material instance here and not have to be remaking new materials each time. So same thing here. I'm going to grab all of these and convert to parameter. And then the parameters, we can call this base color. And whoops. Oh, that's weird. Come on. There we go. Base color. This is going to be the what do you call it? Roughness. And this one is going to become the normal. And again, I'll apply that. And now when you take a look at our material instance, not only do we have these inputs to be able to control everything, but we also have the ability to be able to swap out the texture maps to anything we want. So I can make this a cracked material setup really quickly by going down and picking my dirt cracked, my dirt, wherever it is, dirt cracked. Let's go and look up cracked. So there's my dirt crack normal, and then there's the dirt crack roughness in this case, and same thing. So dirt crack roughness map, and now it's a dirt crack map. That simple. So with that said, these are now dirt crack maps. And you can see where the normal map now is just super strong on these ones. And we probably need to be able to pull these things down. So we've got those parameters here. We can say normal amount. Let's pull that back into a range that makes sense now. So that normal map was produced with much higher value outputs than the other ones. So having that normal input is really handy to be able to play around with that and input better values. So there you go. There's creating a material instance that's going to allow us to have this sort of unlimited ability to be able to reuse this. We don't have to rebuild new materials for this material now. We can just replace those texture maps, make a material instance, replace the texture maps, and we've got another material going. Isn't that easy? It's way easier than creating a new one, isn't it? Okay. We just need our textures, and we can just plug our textures in as we go.